anyway and start getting some practices off. What I would start with first is always, look at, like, think about what the spine is doing, like what her backbone is doing, like the nape of her neck through to her belly button, through to the privates, like what is that shape? And they call this gesture drawing, because you want to kind of pick up on what they think is the gesture of the character. And if you were in a drawing class in college, you might have the model hold a pose like this for just a few minutes, so you got to get it down pretty quickly. So the first thing that you want to think about is, like, what is the body doing? What is the backbone doing? The next thing that you want to kind of establish is, you want to think about the symmetry of the body, and in essence, like, what are the shoulders doing? And like, you understand when I say like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So you want to kind of look at, like, what is this? Where is it going? And is it like maybe like 10:30 is what's happening over here? And you want to just give yourself a reference of, like, where are the shoulders going and what's the basic move over here. For the whole length and proportion of the body, we're not going to go into that for what we're going to do. We're going to keep it a little simpler. But what we want to do is then the next thing is look for the tilt of the hips, all right? So you can even see on her right here, like the hip bone connected and everything else like that. Generally, in one of these poses, you're going to see the hips going the opposite way of the shoulders. They call it the contrapposto. So we got the hips going up, we got the shoulders going that. For proportion-wise, we can always eyeball these things and change them. But for me, starting with the trunk of the person is like the best way to go about it. And not the arms, the head, or whatever. Is to start with the trunk, because all that other stuff is like attached to it. So one of the things we want to do with sort of the hips, think like softball or baseball, like home plate, diamond-like kind of shape. We want to kind of work with the tilt of this thing over here. So we've got, the bottom of the hips, top of the hips, and then for the rest of the body, you can always kind of take a look a little bit at the picture itself and kind of see, well, her torso kind of leans out that way. This side is kind of bent a little bit, and you want to spend some time on this part. Now, how do you know it's right? Well, you know what? You look at your reference, and you look at what you have over here. And if you have to make this thicker, you add on to it and make it thicker. My feeling is start drawing light, and then as you feel like you're closer to what it's supposed to look like, then you go darker and darker and darker. If it's too thick, you just trim it down and take a little bit off of it on each side until you get to, like, the figure that you want. Next thing I'm going to necessarily do is probably the head. And again, if I'm kind of thinking about where the spine is coming out of this thing, and that the head is the spine is attached to, like, almost the back part of the head. So in this case, you can see most of her face is on this side. So I would start with a circle that represents, hey, your brain and most of the mass of your head. And in this case, her jaw or whatever you're going to see as far as the head floating on that side. From here, there's a lot of things you can do, but for a lyrical kind of pose or a lot of things that you want to do, you can make the body thicker or thinner as you feel necessary, but longer limbs, bigger hands, bigger feet will probably tend to look better in the drawing than they would really short. So like for her legs, for example, and you can look even at the regular model, I would start by using whatever you did for the torso and the chest. If you've got straight legs, I would add that and a little bit more. Okay? So whatever you're doing over here, whatever you have for this upper body part over here, I would, in a straight leg pose, I would give yourself at least all of that and a little bit more. Technically, people consider the hip bone connecting to the leg bone as halfway point, but you can always, I would think you're better off making things a little bit longer and a little shorter. Same thing over here. What I would think about with the legs is I was kind of think about a sort of like, what is the bone doing? And the leg is pretty much straight, so I would kind of go from my hip straight down here. Same thing on this side. I would think about what is the bone doing, and I would just look for those angles at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and try to lay them out correctly. You want to kind of consider the leg from here to here. You know, halfway is really going to be my knee, from what I'm going to consider my ankle to my hip. So I've got one leg set up over there, and then I can use that one straight leg to sort of plot out the rest. Big, overly sausage kind of forms. Again, you can make them thinner and thicker as you find necessary. I'll finish this in 2 seconds. Okay guys, we're here. We're at the end of the day. I hope you guys are working. Ariana, I'll send that link to you for the video in a minute. And guys, we got 3 more class sessions till the end of the marking period. Hope everyone's doing well. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Okay, so these big ovals, thicker up near the hips, tapering down to the knees. But when we start to do the knees, we want to kind of, some people do the circles or whatever it is like that. We don't want to taper down to a point where it pinches in too much. We want another little bulge over there. And then for the lower leg, thick to thin. Where it's bent over here, thick to thin. Overall now, we can mess around later on and we can talk about the feet and everything else like that. For her, I didn't really plan this out well. I ran out of a little space, but now we can go to the upper body. Arms, try to look at the picture that you're drawing. Like I said before, longer is better. So look at what we did here as far as the leg. Look at how that one arm sticks out further than the leg. So we're already kind of out here. Try to start with that stick figure first and think about from shoulder to wrist halfway. And the same thing up top over here. If you did about this much here for this arm, try to get a similar amount, especially if they're straight out like this. Same thing, oval kind of shapes, thicker by the elbow, thinner by the wrist. Thicker by the elbow, thinner by the wrist. Is sort of like upside down beer bottle shape or turkey drumstick for things like the forearm. All right. Hands we can always get into later on, but for the most part, just an oval, sort of like a leaf on a tree, and we have our basic start. All right. We can mess around with stuff like this and just do some simple bodies, just working off of pictures that you find online. But break them down like that. Start with the core